Hi, my name is Tori Gordon, and I'm here today to talk to you about managing change in the workplace. James Kessick said that humans are programmed to like certainty. We've all had times where something that should have happened doesn't, and we all know that feeling of annoyance that creeps up on us. If what happens is something we really didn't want, well, annoyance can sometimes blow into anger. Again, that was said by James Kessick regarding change in the workplace. Change in life in general can be scary, but especially change in the workplace because for most of us, we spend more time with our work families than we do our own families. And not only do we invest a tremendous amount of time in our workplace, but it's also how we pay for our bills, keep our families supported, and for a lot of us, it ties into our identity. Change produces anxiety and uncertainty. And with those two things also comes fear. So for most of us, I feel like we tend to overanalyze how we're going to react to change even before change even starts. So in a matter of speaking, we set ourselves up for failure anytime there's any large change coming. First, I'd like to talk to you about ways to prepare for change. The first thing to consider is to prepare for multiple outcomes. Whenever we know we're going to be changing something, we always have to assume that there are several potential ways that the situation could go. If we go in with a naivete attitude thinking that, well, it can only go this certain way, so we'll just plan for that, we're definitely not doing ourselves any favors, and we need to definitely have plans for several different outcomes. Another way, according to an article that I read, was to quiet your limbic system. Now, for those of you who don't know, the limbic system is actually the part of the brain that controls basic emotions: fear, anger, anxiety, all of the emotions I spoke to earlier about what humans tend to think of when it comes to change. So if we can learn to quiet that part of our brain and just sort of control it, talk ourselves through that we know change is coming, change is inevitable, and prepare ourselves mentally for that, it puts us on the right track to accept the change better than if we just don't think about it at all. A third key is to get over your pursuit of perfection. That, I believe, is true in all aspects of life. You're never going to achieve perfection. You can be perfectly happy with an imperfect situation, but definitely don't expect perfection. Anytime you're dealing with the human element, you're always thinking of free will. Obviously, when you have more than one human, you're looking at several wills, several definitions of perfection. And if all of that combines with everyone just assuming that we have to have this one single outcome is the only way it can work, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Another way, especially in business, is to prioritize people over processes. This is huge, especially in larger corporations when people are a part of the process, but you can never put the process first. I believe that anytime you're making a decision in business that's going to affect your people, is to definitely consider how it's going to affect them first over how it's going to affect the processes. People definitely need to be prioritized over an outcome with systems and with machines. Definitely, first and foremost, put your people first. A fifth thing for preparing for change, knowing your limits. This is big because limits are a lot of different definitions, especially in business as in HR. Limits as far as legalities, limits as far as rules, limits as far as what your business considers acceptable, limits as far as what you're comfortable with. I think having a good perspective and a broad picture of what the limits are, both individually and as a company, it's going to give you a better spectrum going in to know what you really need the outcome to be in order for the change itself to be successful. The second topic I'd like to touch on is reactions to change. For people, a lot of times they'll actually blame the change and say that the change is making things unnecessarily worse, when it's sometimes just their fear of change and the fear of having to learn something new. It could be not only that the process is working fine, but the individual or groups, maybe it's just change itself that has them a little bit scared. So definitely keep that in mind. Another thing is that potentially employees might not trust the people that are leading the change effort. This I've seen as an example working for larger companies when you have your base of employees that work at a local level and all of a sudden there's a huge change coming and corporate sends people in that are not familiar with your area, not familiar with your business, and not familiar with your people. Your people know you and your people trust you. If you have an outside source come in to implement this change, sometimes that breeds a little bit of mistrust, and that can hurt the entire process. So definitely make sure that whoever's implementing the change to your people is someone that they trust. Thirdly, they don't like the way that the change was introduced. And I feel that this really ties into control. A lot of people want to feel valued, and a big part of value is feeling that their input is valued. So if the change just comes in and they're told it's my way or the highway, a lot of times people can take that the wrong way and thinking that their opinion and that their input doesn't matter. So definitely keep that in mind whenever you're going to roll out a change to your people. Make sure that their input is heard and that they are felt valuable. Another problem is that sometimes people might feel like the change will produce a personal loss for them, whether it's income, wages, time. Maybe it affects their job. Maybe they really loved what they did before, and now they're losing a part of that job that was maybe something they were extremely emotionally attached to. So definitely keep that in mind, how there's business and there's personal. But as we all know, sometimes those lines are grayed and they get crossed. So it's always good to figure out if people are adverse to change, why? Is it because of the change itself, or is it because of a situation that occurred because of the change? Another thing is that potentially if people have experienced a lot of change already that didn't go well, sometimes it's the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back. So if they've already experienced so much change either in their personal life or even at work, and then this is just that one more thing that happens to them, it could be that it's not the change itself that they're upset with. It could be the fact that things are changing. So it's always good to ferret that out if there's an adverse reaction to it. Is it the change itself, or is it just because it's another change that this person is having to deal with? Some possible solutions to adverse reactions. Encourage employees to openly express their opinion, their thoughts and their feelings about the change. Again, I touched earlier on the fact that people want their input to matter and their opinion to be valued. So it's always great at the beginning of the process to tell your people. Throughout this entire process, we welcome your input. Feedback only gives us more of your perspective and only teaches us more about how we can mainstream this process, a transparent process that the employees can be a part of. That's huge. That's definitely good. Make sure that your employees know that their opinion is valued by you. Listen carefully to their concerns and explore them. A lot of times you can find out that maybe they have a concern that they shouldn't actually be worried about because maybe there's part of it they just aren't privy to. So explaining that to them, that will a lot of times help them with what they were worried about. It could also give you input from another perspective that you hadn't yet thought of or hadn't yet experienced because the change hadn't physically been rolled out yet and it was something that you hadn't come up with. So definitely another thing about get their input. Identify the people who have the most to lose with the change. This is paramount to me. A lot of times there will be small changes or large changes that will affect people completely differently across the board in a corporation. And I think highlighting the ones who will be experience the vast amount of change due to this, I think that's very important to know, because someone that's invested and has the most to lose, you're looking at someone that's definitely going to be more emotionally tied to the change. I would say help early on, identifying new roles in the group to help represent genuine contributions and to help mitigate their losses. So if this change does affect someone in a great way, how can we find another way to make up for what they've lost or for what's changed? Embrace the fact that you respect and understand that something has changed for them and that is difficult. And although we can't always go back to the way things were, we can always look for ways to move forward as a group, as employer-employee relationship, to fill that gap for whatever the change might have produced. Again, I believe that change is something that we all fear, but it doesn't have to be impossible to get through. I think the more education and the more research that's done so that people know that changes aren't just made haphazardly and that their input does matter. We all want to feel valuable, and especially employees and employers. We want to know that our voice can be heard and that even if we can't change the process itself, that our input can potentially help replace something that's lost in the change.